first? Okay. Well, I'll do just a brief introduction for many of you who have not met me before. I've been married for 33 years to my husband. I have 5 children. The oldest is, well, actually 34 years to my husband. My oldest daughter is 33 and my youngest is 21. They're in various different places of the world. My oldest works with JSOC with Special Forces, so she's all over the country, getting ready to deploy actually in July. My second oldest is in Tennessee with my 2 grandkids. My third is teaching English in Chile. My fourth is living in Orlando, works for Universal Studios. And my number 5 is traveling around with a startup company that videotapes, does 360 pictures of restaurants and things like that, and also is a travel agent.
Cool.
So that's where all of my children are. All of them love to travel, and hopefully someday I can get them all to settle back home. My one that has my grandkids keeps wanting to move back to Florida. He actually likes Lake and Sumter County as options because it's not so close to home. And so that's my goal when they settle, that they'll come back home, come live near me, and that's part of my reasons for running for office. I am 6th generation Floridian. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was in one of the first legislature, maybe I think it's 6 grades, 5 grades. Aaron Jernigan, Orlando, prior to being Orlando, was called Jernigan's Junction, and my mother's maiden name was Jernigan. So he was in the turn of the century legislature, and then my other grandfather was the high sheriff, is what they called it, of Sumter County, in 1890s and 1900s. Then we had a big lull in politics, and my family, you know, just they were probably not very affluent. They were orange pickers and packers, and my father was a maintenance supervisor. And anyway, so basically come from a regular, just average Blue County background, Blue County, you know, hardworking, blue-collar workers. How I got involved in politics, my husband was the one who did it first. He went to law school. I worked while he went through law school. We had the kids. He always had an interest in politics. He worked on the recount campaign and got to know a few people there, and then when there was an opening, people called him and said, hey, would you be interested in running for office? He was conservative. We had there was a tight speaker's race going on at that time. They talked him into running. He ran for 4 years, and then he left and became a judge. Because the way I look at things, actually we were at a conference, and this may be more information than you guys need, and I'll be quick, but anyway, we were at a conference, and we were asking the question, you know, as a Christian conservative individual, where can you make the most difference? Where would you go? Would you stay in leadership in the House? Would you go to the judiciary? It was a group called Student Leadership University out of Orlando. The guy's name was Jay Strack. He goes, I don't know, I think I'd go for judge. Any idiot can be a legislator. And so my husband ran for judge, and then I ran as for the legislature. It was a couple years later, Dennis Ross finished out his term in that seat. It came open. Being involved as I had always been, having the kids, and just I've never had the position to be able to do something like this. And I was looking to find a good candidate, calling my friends, people I knew, talking, and everyone's like, you know these issues. I'm like, yeah, but I don't speak in public, and I'm busy, and we've got, you know, at that point 3 of my kids were still home. And they're like, but you know the issues. And so I decided to run. And first thing I said is, let me pray about it. It was kind of like, I'll pray about it. And then I really did pray about it, and I didn't have a peace with saying no. And I thought, okay, this is the biggest joke ever. I mean, I can't imagine God would want me to be able to do this. But I ran for office, and my first campaign speeches where I have absolutely no idea how effective I'll be, but I care about the state. I've lived here my whole life. I have no desire to live anywhere else, and I want to go up there and see what I can do to make a difference. And I got elected in a 3-way primary, my first campaign, and then I've had a race every time, but been elected subsequently each time. So that was the background of how I got into this process. So I kind of frequently tell people, don't underestimate anyone's ability to do this. I was excited when Jennifer Sullivan ran, and there was like, you're too young. I'm like, if you have a passion and you want to make a difference and you want to get up there and work and learn the issues, you can do it. That's how this process was intended, for average individuals to represent us and to go to Tallahassee or to Washington and be the voice of the people, and to be amongst the people and part of the people and live a life or pay a mortgage or raise a family, not just be the politician. So that's who I am, and what I've been able to do since I've been up there. Some of the legislation I'm most proud of was when my husband was there. They had the constitutional amendment for parental notice of abortion that went on the ballot, passed. He was one of the original members of putting that into law, and they had a lot of fight from the Democrats, and there was actually Planned Parenthood working behind the scenes, and he was they were working to make it really good. That was the opportunity. He's like, let's make this a strong law. He lost in that fight, and it was kind of a weak law, and so there was a ton of loopholes, and so he was going to continue to work to fix that while he was there. He wasn't able to do that, so when I got elected, I made that a priority of something I wanted to do, so we were able to fix the loopholes. You could no longer judge shop, some of those things, so we really cleaned up the parental notice of abortion so that that could actually work the way it was supposed to. I then went on and worked on other issues in the pro-life world, so I've done several pieces of pro-life legislation. Another piece of legislation that I'm very proud of was there is a group in Polk County that deals with developmentally disabled students and or people, and it's the parents who their kids who mostly Down syndrome, but a lot of various ones who the kids are outliving the parents now, and the parents had a lot of fear. They wanted to come together and build a planned community, kind of like a 55 seniors community for people with developmental disabilities, where you could live there as the parent and live there as a child. Maybe they could be in their own home, or so they could get in the habit of kind of living on their own or in a group setting and have some normalcy with kind of supervision. So not an institution, but the law at the time said you couldn't build homes like that closer than 1,000 foot to each other. You couldn't have two group homes closer than 1,000 feet. This was a planned unit development, completely different than anything else we had done, so we had to change the law for that. That took 4 years to get that done. We finally did get it done. Noah's Landing was the facility. It is now built. That is now a model that is used there. They did one similar in Jacksonville. People come from all over the country to see how this is working. It makes a lot of sense. There's our Noah's Landing. It's in North Polk County.
Okay.
There's another woman, Betsy, Betsy's name anyway, from Orlando, who, I can't think of her name at the moment, sorry, it's called Halftimers, I don't have it all the time. Anyway, Betsy, so Betsy is over there doing the same kind of thing in Orlando. That's been very successful, and it pulls resources, so that was another piece of legislation that I was very proud to have been able to work on. Coming from just average people trying to do things in their world to make their lives better, and the law gets in the way, and that's what I think we're here for. So.
Sure does.
Since I've been in this process, that was 4 years in the House, then I ran for the Senate. When Paula Dockery retired, I ran for her seat, so I have been in the Senate now for 6 years. In the House, I was more in education. When I got elected to the Senate, I became the chair of Regulated Industries, which was, I called the Sin Committee, because it has, gambling, alcohol, tobacco, all of it. Yeah. Also has accounting to veterinarians. We had everything. But to be able to work in that committee and learn all of that part of law, which was I didn't know a lot about, was very exciting. Then I was the chair of higher education for 2 years, and this past year I was the chair of the Finance and Tax Committee, which was also an exciting committee where we figured out, where can we give back the resources we have in the state of money to the people, the money that we have in the state of Florida to the people. We have, as just talking to Chad on the way up, our budget has grown over the last few years, but in addition to that, in the 10 years that I've been elected, we've given $10 billion back as well, between tax incentives, tax rebates, tax cuts, various different things. We've done, tax exemptions, just a whole bunch of different things that we've done $1 billion back each year. So that was exciting. It's funny, people forget my staff director who works with me in that committee actually worked when my husband was an intern in law school back when the Democrats were in charge. And he said it's so funny because he knows taxes. He doesn't really have a political stance. He knows taxes. And he said, back then we would sit around this same table and figure out what taxes to raise. We sit around that table and figure out what taxes to cut. And it was a constant reminder to me in this legislature, and right now in the Senate, we have a 24, in just a few elections that can go the other way, and the wrong governor, the wrong president, people are just. But unfortunately, how you want to look at it, Florida's had 20 years of good conservative leadership, and people, unfortunately, the younger generation doesn't know what it's like to have anything else. They don't know what it's like to have. Crime rates that are, letting prisoners out. Remember when Charlie Crist, he's different now, but when he first got elected, he was chain gang Charlie. He came in with the crime issues and fixed crime stuff. And then Jeb Bush got elected and fixed education stuff. And then you've got Scott who's come in and fixed the economy. So we've had this long term of trying to fix things, and it's all it's going to take is if we get the wrong person elected, they're going to start rolling it all back.
Chipping away and all that.
And I don't know that if that happens, we'll ever get it back again, because we look how much we've slid in so many areas, even with good leadership. So anyway, that's so going forward, what I plan to work on is to continue to build upon some of the policies we've put in place, especially with the, not so much the school safety. When you say school safety, everyone thinks you're talking about the firearm safety part of the bill, but I really want to work on school issues and school discipline. We have done some disservice to our teachers and our students through the years by, and it wasn't us, a lot of it came from the federal government. You have kids that are classified as emotionally behavioral disturbed, and that's a disability. And those kids are treated the same as a child that has a disability that may be Down syndrome, or they have a physical disability, cerebral palsy, whatever. Those kids are treated exactly the same. And our laws say that if you're acting in accordance to your disability, we can't discipline you for that, which would make sense if a kid is, maybe has Tourette's and yells out unexpectedly or something like that. But in the same sense, you've got kids who have emotional behavioral disabilities, and they may completely cuss out and berate a teacher, but because they've been classified that way, we can't discipline them for that.
That's ridiculous.
And so we've got to get in and fix some of those things. It's very complicated. It requires a combination with the federal government to work on it. But I've started doing research on Rule 6, which is the rule of the federal government, and we have a good partner now in the federal government with Tavares to hopefully come in and try to fix some of these things so that we can expel children from school. Right now, you can't kick them out for more than 10 days. They have to have the right to come back because a lot of them are labeled as disabled. And you can't get rid of them from, some of those things. That's what's tied in the hands of our teachers to be able to keep control of their classrooms, and that's the problem that we've had. So those children we need to be able to deal with. They need to be educated, but we need to be able to figure out how to put them in the place for the proper way for them to get educated, and to deal with their issues. And a lot of that comes with mental health counseling and our guidance counselors, and all. It's a mess. And hopefully I plan to work on those over the next few years.
What is Rule 6? You said Rule 6?
Rule 6 is the federal guidelines on how to deal with students that have emotional and behavioral disabilities. And so if you were to kind of Google and search that and look for it in the rules from the federal government guidelines of IDEA, you would be able to do, if you want to do that, do some research, let me know, feel free, because that's what I'm digging to find.
I just wondered what that was.
That's the rule of, because I started researching, that's the rule that it's all in, so.
Kelly, I am really interested in that. If I could interrupt for a minute.
Sure, no, go ahead.
Everybody
We can
okay?
move to the questions part now. That's kind of that was the instruction there.
Okay, I'm really interested in that because I work with families who have adopted children that have these emotional abusive disorders, to the point where they are put in a regular classroom because they're really, really smart, but then they will, for an unexplained reason, attack a child physically and draw blood and never regret it, never be sorry. And there's something called applied behavioral analysis, which is really expensive for families, but it seems to be very effective. And I wanted to know whether something about that can be considered as much as a teacher and or a guidance counselor or a combination of the teacher and administration having the authority to say the child should see a psychiatrist for an evaluation before they can be brought back into our classroom. Because some of the parents refuse to put their child on medication. They just discipline them at home the best way they know how.
It's complicated, and I have one of my children. I have to deal with some mental challenges, and so I fully understand that the whole world of mental. Mental health is a mess. It's so subjective. So that's your challenge. And there is a certain segment of people who have, and I hate to say true mental, but there's really mental disorders. They need to be on medication. But then there's some who it's more of it's nurture, not nature, and how they were raised. But again, no less need to be treated differently. Right. And it's complicated even in the best of scenarios, and it is expensive. And I just know from my own daughter trying to get into the psychiatrist, it's a backlog. When she's got insurance and she's tenacious about it. It's hard, and so we have a lot of money that we're putting into that world. But when the federal government and the state government starts funding something, you can almost hear the spigot open.
Oh yeah.
And it's hard to, from the 30,000 foot, put in the proper restraint. So I would like to do more with our guidance counselors, but I want an addition to different kinds of guidance counselors. You've got one set of guidance counselors, which is what they've all become today, which is making sure you've checked all the boxes for graduation, making sure you've got your prereqs, making sure you get your college out. That's one kind of guidance counselor. We need to have on site, and we put $400 million this year into some of these areas, from the safety guardian program to guidance counselors to a lot of these different things. We need to work with a different kind of guidance counselor who has been given the tools to recognize kids that are having real struggles and help those kids.
Will more education be required then for those
They
people?
actually have the required education. I have talked to the guidance counselors in Polk County. One of the leaders in our school board over guidance counselors actually goes to church with me, and she's like, let us have. They don't get the hands-on time with the students anymore that they've been trained to give, because they have to see so many students. They become paper pushers. So we need to really work on that. We didn't have time to fully delve into all of that last year with the school safety bill. We put money towards it. We started down that path. But this is not something that's going to be solved in one silver bullet piece of legislation. It's going to be trial of error, what works, what doesn't work. Starting down a path, and if you start seeing abuse, then modify, fix, and because it's really hard to figure out where everyone's going to do the right thing.
Is there any legislation on the books right now that has a parent accountability component to it?
There is accountability. I mean, parents have rights and privileges to go into. We did that a couple of years ago with the IDA is not the word. Into the meeting where they come together and do their IEP meetings. And those types of things. There was a while there where conscientious parents were being, like they want to bring their psychiatrist or psychologist like into the IEP meetings, and they weren't allowed, and things like that. So we've changed the laws now and said that the parent does have rights. So for the conscientious parent who is concerned and wanting to work with their IEP program and do a good thing with their child, they can. That doesn't solve the problem for the disengaged parent, which, and you may see I hate to have this one on video because I was so attacked, but I did a bill a few years ago called the Parental Accountability, and it got picked up by the Orlando Sentinel, and they called it the Grading Parents Bill. But I tried to do a bill that wanted to try and identify these parents who completely disengaged, completely, so that we could then figure out why, and then address it. If it's because they feel it's the school's responsibilities, or maybe they're scared of the school themselves, or maybe they don't speak the language, or maybe whatever their reasons are for being disengaged. I wanted to have be able to put that on the report card twofold. It stays with that child, so you can kind of see historically kind of what's gone on with the parent. Maybe see if there's been a change to a foster. Now you've got someone engaged. Also help a teacher when you set up that first class to not give them 20 kids with all disengaged parents, and then give Miss Smith all the rock star parents, because that's different. Anyway, it got killed out of the chute because it was called grading parents, and everybody said, oh, we don't want to grade parents. And if they read it, I said that it went on a report card that you got an unsatisfactory as a parent if you didn't show up for meetings, you didn't sign paperwork, you didn't sign the agendas, and then and the way I had written the bill was, and if you called and asked why, a simple phone call, why did I get an unsatisfactory, moved you to a needs improvement. Just if you cared enough to call to see why, or investigated, or in any way responded to the unsatisfactory, you got a needs improvement, which is a really low bar. But still, it didn't go anywhere. But I'm still trying to figure out how we deal with that component, because
it's one of the things people complain about most is the lack of parent engagement in the educational process.
And they try. They do pizza. They do ice cream parties, but that's not hitting the root of the problem.
No, and it's the same parents that help with all of those things.
And this money's not going to solve it. It's not giving more money to the school. It's being able to how do you identify those parents that need the help and connect.
Have you talked to the school district staff up here or Superintendent Cornegie about those, because those kinds of things they're trying to address too with disengaged parents?
I haven't spoken with the superintendent up here specifically on these things.
I would. She'd move ahead.
But we have been, I've looked at what the other schools are trying to do. Their hands are somewhat tied. They don't have the ability to, it's got to be, they don't have the ability to go get the parent or to identify that parent, or it doesn't even stay in the CUME file if it's not allowed to going forward for the student. So, because the CUME file has to be on the student. So, there's some things that can be done, like again, all of these are not gonna be overnight silver bullet fixes, but these are things that I wanna continue to work on and try to come up with solutions on how we can fix
Oh, I
It
this.
have
seems
a
like that's the
question.
beginning of addressing the
Yeah.
mental health factor, is the parent engagement.
On some of
Right.
the kids, that's absolutely true. But then I also know some very involved parents, we were one of those who I had a child that was struggling, trying to figure out how to navigate that and find the right program and get the right help. It was near impossible.
Yeah.
Even when I had insurance, you couldn't get the right referrals, you couldn't get, so we ended up spending our personal money to send her a program out, and not say our personal money, no insurance money, it was all our money is what I meant, to send her to an intensive program out in, out of state where she got the help and the diagnosis and the things that she needed, but it was very expensive and we were blessed to be able to afford it.
This Monday, the school board here has got on their agenda to fund 6 mental health counselors in addition. They've got that that they're pushing forward because they are moving forward at trying to do more to identify problem kids, and of course this has to do more with school safety. But
Well, and that's what we put money in there for that purpose, and for the school districts that are a little bit smaller, it's a little easier when you start looking at school districts like Miami-Dade. It's unsustainable amounts of dollars to try and do those things, but then you have to, capitalize. And I know like some of the programs, Pace Centers for Girls, which is a program that works with girls that are having a challenge, they've started from their organization putting a counselor in the schools because they know how to deal with troubled girls. So it makes sense to have in schools where you have a high population of girls that are troubled, let them put someone who they have to their organization's training on campus. So it's going to probably take a little bit of a come together effort of everybody to solve some of these problems. The school district can't afford to cover, can't afford to educate a child and afford for all their mental health needs and also all the various, and their food needs, which is when a lot of schools have taken that on now because of kids who go home. That we're putting too much on the educational system, and they can't focus
Yes,
on their
we are.
primary goal, which is to educate.
Right.
I have a question. Well, first I volunteered in an IEP classroom where there was about 18 kids with multiple disabilities. And why the teacher was so glad to have me there because it's hours of documentation for each child and what goes in the computer. Why all that?
It's a combination between state and federal.
Yeah, I know, but
And the federal IDA and how we've gotten to that point, a lot of it goes back to the funding. I mean, to try and put a handle on, because different things get different funding, and you got to make sure that the money is being paid appropriately and all those kind of things. So it's a, I have a dog.
it's just like she used to get so frustrated.
It's
And because they found out in this particular elementary school that mainstreaming these kids did not work out.
on some of them. My sister's an SLD teacher, and she did inclusion classes, then she did resource classes, and then she did hospital homebound. So she's done a little bit of all of it, and it's the same thing. But you think about in our lives, just how our health care has changed through the years. You know, a long time ago, you went to a doctor and said, "I'm sick." He's like, "Great, go to the ear doctor." And you went to the ear doctor and said, "My ear hurts." Now you've got to get the referral that's got to be checked off and approved by your insurance. All of that happened because of the rampant amount of fraud that happens. Same thing happens with our government. People want government accountability, and I'm all for that. So what that trickles down to is an incredible amount of paperwork to make sure that you're billing as a school system to the federal government for 47 kids that are on an IEP for speech and whatever. You want to make sure that that speech therapy is happening, and all that turns into paperwork.
It's a similar nightmare in nursing homes too.
All of it, because that's the only way to keep accountable. You have to have that paper trail. So I think as technology improves with more of these things, it goes back the other direction. But then on the flip side, now it's available on technology, and there's a lot of concern about now who has access, because now it's easily accessible. So now it becomes the flip problem.
Privacy issue.
It's always going to be something. It's not easy to govern when there's a lot of those issues. Yeah.
I know everybody in here that's been here before is tired of hearing me ask this. I asked it. I watched for years as the ACLU dismantled our mental health and also our children and people with disabilities. They dismantled it. I saw, my husband had a uncle that was Down syndrome. And so he was out from Orlando off of Silver Star Road. There was a children's, they had spina bifida, they had Down syndrome, that was, it was large, but they were in units and they were wonderful. And they made them shut it down.
It's institutional.
17 of those, they weren't all kids. Some of them were older, some of them died because of that. They didn't care. It was just that they were going to dismantle everything we had, the foundation of our mental and then the physically disabled. And now we've got to start at the bottom, but you're talking about in the schools and you're talking about what's going on right now. Who's going to set a foundation so that we can build on those and get it something back that will take care of it?
The challenge is the two different ideologies between the Republican and the Democrat. The Republicans believe, or I would suspect we all believe, that the parents are the ones who should make the choices, who care the most. Individual should be the one who cares the most, makes the choices, and when you have a person who can't make those choices, then it's the parent, the guardian, whatever. The Democratic side believes it's the government. The government knows best. So when you try to merge those two ideologies together, that's the problem. And that was my problem with my bill for the Noah's Landing. They don't want institutions. Everybody out of institutions. I understand that. If government is taking care of everybody, no, that's not what we want. Is government taking care of everybody? But the Republican mindset is, I know my child, and I know my child's best setting. And I know my child's best setting and most safest setting may be living in another room in another dorm or a house with a caring individual who I have assured is caring for my child. And it may be institutional, but that might be what I think is best for my child. It's the same in the nursing home category. They have the whole movement of age in place. And I completely support age in place, and I hope that I'm in the ability to age in place. But I also know that my grandmother, my husband's grandmother, who has very severe Alzheimer's, aging in place is not the safest place for her anymore because her house is too big. And living in a facility that is smaller, still looks like an apartment. We have all her normal things around her, so and she doesn't ever know she's never lived anywhere else. She thinks she's always lived there, and the doors are locked, and she can't get out. And that's the safest. But I, as the responsible adult, can look at the decisions. So not everybody needs to live like Grandma lives.
Right.
But then that's what's best for Grandma. But when the government comes in and says we know what's best, it becomes much more. This is aging, being institutionalized, being locked in a facility is bad.
It's not.
And when you're going to see what happened, when we were, what happened down with the hurricane down south was horrible. It was awful. There's a lot of things that could have been done differently. But the other side of that story, too, is anyone who's ever run a facility, a nursing home, to move those people, even to move them for a short period of time, is very traumatic for these people.
Oh, yeah.
And like Grandma's place, they had no power. They had 2 cool rooms where they had the air conditioning going full blast. Very cool, comfortable rooms. They would put all the residents in the room, and the residents would get up and forget why they're there. They didn't know there was a hurricane. They didn't know there was no air conditioning in their room.
Yeah.
They'd get up and go back to their room.
Yep.
And then they'd have to go find them all again and usher them back into that room because it was hot. And then 5 minutes later they go, where's, and you know what I mean? What are you going to do, stand at the doors and guard them?
It's not easy.
That's what you'd have to
So,
do.
but the press,
Geriatric nurse, it's not easy
but the
to
press doesn't
evaluate
cover
them.
that side of it. So
No.
you can't, it's not possible to have everybody 100%. And that's why, our lawyers, one bad thing happens and they come in and, sure, in 20/20 hindsight, everybody can tell you what they should have done. In the moment when you're trying to manage 35 people who have Alzheimer's who are trying to wander back to their rooms, and you got medical issues going on, and you've also got all the things that are occurring. Sometimes things fall through the cracks, and bad things happen to good people. It wasn't always negligence, but it's a challenge because if you say that publicly, then it becomes like you're making. It's not making excuses. It's a reality. But that's why you have to have responsible individuals, responsible parents. And that's why it was all dismantled,
It's
because it
not-
was institutionalized.
Being a
But
geriatric
they were
nurse,
happy there.
I don't disagree with you, yeah.
when you have the Alzheimer's and when we had to, one time we had a fire and we had to evacuate 65 residents, and you're talking ones with Alzheimer's, paranoid schizophrenia, wheelchairs,
yes.
oxygen, and if it's on night shift, you have a limited amount of staff. We got them all outside, but it's
And sure, in a perfect world with unlimited resource, you would have 20 more staff. But if you had 20 more staff, then that resident's going to have to pay 4 times as much.
Yes.
And then they're not going to be able to afford that. So what do they do when they can't afford it? Then you have to go on the government assistance to pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, they can't afford it either, unless not with their own money, unless they start taxing all your money. Then they can afford it. And that's the Democratic mindset is, sure, Bill Gates has enough money to pay for everybody in that nursing home. He should pay for it. Well, no, if that's the case, then what's been Bill Gates' incentive to make all that money?
Right.
So it's a challenge, and it comes to the fundamental ideological differences between Republicans and Democrats,
Reality.
or individual people who believe in personal responsibility and those who believe in corporate responsibility.
Can I ask about shifting gears entirely here? There's a report that comes out every year from a national organization on taxpayers, and they just came out and they said that Florida has got something like $10 billion in unfunded liabilities for pensions and benefits. And now I know Florida has usually got pretty good FRS systems, but I know also that they've changed accounting standards in the last 2 or 3 years to make them start putting on the value or the liability that for all these promises that they make for benefits. That's health insurance for retirees. And I think some of those have been massive because I've seen all of a sudden there's a huge jump in the local budgets here for the county and the school district. And, hey guys, hey.
You're interrupting Vance.
Yes.
God.
These guys
Well,
are cameras moving.
You're also on the camera.
got our backside.
And so anyway, they getting these surprises where then it gets uncovered, and when they have their annual report and they talk about the pension liabilities, all of a sudden they've had to ramp it up quite a bit, and we're talking millions. And so my question is, and now I see a trend where the local police departments who've had their own, or fire, I'm not sure which, but I know police here locally in Tavares, they had their own pension, but now they working up this gimmick to all jump on the FRS bandwagon, and I think maybe have worked out a deal that they end up taking on the liability that was unfunded from some of these operations. And so my question is, what are people doing to make sure that we don't get drowned? Like, I come from California where their cities have gone bankrupt because the pension liabilities would just get carried, because every time I go and watch these local budget hearings, they just automatically, oh well, the pensions for employees are going up 8% this year, and health insurance is going up 8%, and so they add it right to the top before they get to whatever's left to spend on something.
Sure.
And what can be done? Is the state doing anything to curb that? Because it's just, to me, it's just like a Pac-Man. It keeps eating up whatever available funds are available.
We have done things these last years, and Larry Metz was spearheaded a lot of them, and I worked with him on a lot of that in the government accountability bills that we've done. So we've done an incredible amount of accounting, government accountability. We work with CFOs, so we have one centralized accounting audit kind of system where they're going to start putting all of their stuff into one similar type database so that you can easily, so it's not everybody's own little budgeting style of accounting, it's going to be uniform. We're doing the same thing down to our school boards with school board accountability, the same way. Now, all the local governments, and if you had someone sitting here from the League of Cities or League of Counties, they would tell you it's the most awful thing ever because it's not our place, but it's beneficial on multiple
Ohio's
levels.
doing that. Every
Yeah,
single city
it's a
and
similar
county is
chart of
on one
accounts.
system.
Yeah, we have a similar chart of accounts, so you can know, not just for government and it's for anyone's oversight. If you happen to be a private layman accountant and you just want to pull up Lake County's budget and look at it, it'll be in a format in a way that's familiar that you can figure out those budgets. So we did government accountability bills that went through last year. Like I said, Larry Metz took the Auditor General reports and we put a lot of that into law. He and I, and then we also did another one for school board accountability.
Did it actually
which I did
get
with Jennifer,
into law?
actually.
Was
Jennifer
that the one
responsible on
that
one.
Jennifer got through the counter?
Yeah, that was Jennifer.
that-
That was just, as I was saying, like
Okay.
Larry did the one and Jennifer did the other. So yeah,
Because
we
his
did
didn't
that.
get through, did it?
Parts of it did, not
Okay.
all of it. It went in. We got things done.
Okay.
So
I know he's shifting around because
Got things done.
there's multiple ways. There's
Right.
multiple ways to get things done. There's many ways to kill a bill. There's a lot of ways to keep them alive. So we got a lot of it done. Not as much as we would have liked, but we got a lot of that done. And I will say, Florida's pension, we constantly monitor and watch, and try to afford for and prepare. A few years ago, we had to change the contribution levels for a lot of our judges and law and fire. They were not happy. I think that happened in 2004 or 5 that we had to do some of that.
in
to
corporations,
keep it
they require the
sustainable.
employees to contribute.
Yes.
If there's an increase from 4% to 6%
Right, yes.
because of the analysis of what needs to go in, the
We usually
employees
rank
have to
higher.
pick it up.
I don't know what the report you were speaking of, but typically Florida ranks really well in our
Yeah.
sustainability on our pensions and all of those things. That all plays into our AAA bond rating. We're one of the few states that have had a AAA bond rating
Right.
even during the downturn because we had enough money in reserves. We have $6 billion, I believe, in reserves right now. I might be wrong in the amount. But that was another reason why with the hurricane, we were able to immediately tap into our reserves, take care of what needed to be taken care of, got the economy going back. You know, you didn't hear, to everybody, you would think that our hurricane season wasn't that bad, because we've all pretty much, even the Keys is recovering and is having, now they're back open for marketing. I was just at the Enterprise Florida meeting where they do some of the Visit Florida. I know that took a lot of hits, but what those organizations are doing are promoting the Keys are open, they're back open for business, you can come back down and visit, which is building back up the economy and those types of things that we've done on the forefront. And a lot, like I said, there's the good and bad. I know people have some concerns, but a private business markets, a private business does what they, we have done that to Florida to bring in our tourism dollars, bring businesses here, which brought jobs here. All of those things raise the whole economy. So because we had the reserves and things that we had, we bounced back much faster than a lot of the other states. Others, Louisiana, Katrina and all those, our hurricane was, Jacksonville was devastated. The Keys were devastated, but we were able to bounce back much quicker because we have policies in place that allow people to do that. Our governor and our EMS systems are set up. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity during the hurricane to go. We had the cities who met with the counties, who met with the state on constant, continuous conference calls. The nursing homes had their own little network where they called into the various different ones. I mean, it was impressive to the point that we did it so well that other states are coming down going, can we follow you through your next hurricane? Taiwan said, can we come over and see what you guys have been doing so that we're more prepared, so it's systems that are working. And it comes from having leadership and someone who knows how to do those things.
Can there be a will to make the employees, they just sit there and they push through these increases in the pensions and the benefits?
Elections matter.
In other words, you're saying you got it, but people, the locals, I mean, I'm sophisticated enough to know what's going on, but the locals have no clue. And it gets buried in like a committee and it's just added on as an automatic thing. And so it just keeps increasing the budget every time, and then there's less left, and people say, why isn't there anything for schools? Well, because they're sucking it up with things like that they take it right off the top.
We need to watch our local government, local bodies of government all the way down. I venture to say almost to the level of an HOA.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even care what's going on with their HOA. Then their HOA, someone joked that ISIS began as an HOA president. I mean, it was not meaning to, like I said, you take this video on the, don't put it all on the web or I'm going to be like snippets out. I'll be in trouble all over the place. She's just counting ISIS. It doesn't matter to her, they're HOA presidents. That's not what I'm saying. But the point is all elections matter.
Yeah.
And local government, I know sarcasm doesn't print well, I know. They're all looking at me going, we're going to no, that's okay. So, be judicious, please. But anyhow, but local elections matter. All elections matter, even city elections. And you frequently watch where you tend to have the people with a liberal mindset start in the city.
Yeah.
And then they get well known, then they move to the county. And then they get well known, or they start in the school boards. All elections matter. And as a Republican club, I think you guys probably preaching to the choir know that. But all elections matter. And you've got to make sure that we're watching those accountabilities at all levels, because it affects all of it. One city goes under, and then the county has to start picking up the slack, and then the county has to deal with it. The state, so that's how you fix a lot of those budgets. Is you put the budget makers. We have a system in place of elections for the purpose of being able to pick the people who have the right ideology. We just have to make sure we get engaged, but it's exhausting. I mean, I'm in a Republican club, I know.
We've just figured that out. We're just working like 8 days a week.
And they don't walk in and say, hey, guess what, I'm the new guy and I'm going to raise your taxes.
Yeah.
Because many of them are nonpartisan, and you've got to
Nancy
dig and
Pelosi
find.
says that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. We don't all get the
But
blessing of an
these
SC.
locals around there,
Thank
No, and they all say the right things of what they need to say to get elected. But then as soon as they, don't say the right thing, but then we need to unelect them. And that's,
we're busy doing it.
and a lot of people push to term limits, and I'm not, I can go both ways, because we have good people up there who are doing a good job. I hate to have them arbitrarily term limited. It's one of those back to the mindset of where every election is a term limit, because we're supposed to vote accordingly. But what we need to work on the most, and what we're trying to do in the schools, and we have even a constitutional amendment now on requiring more civics education at the different levels. We've got to, our next generation has got to know how this process works. And unfortunately, what they're learning now, because it's primary of the day, is the way you get things done is to protest in the streets with a sign.
Yeah.
That is not a conversation, and that is not a solution, and that is not being politically expedient to protest in the streets with a sign. That's not. When we had these kids from Parkland who came up to meet with us, I knew at that moment they were angry, and they just wanted, and I fully understood their emotions of where they were coming from, and I expected nothing different.
But the Democrats were playing.
But we've moved past that now. We are now 6 months out, or however many months out, 3 months out. Now we need to start coming up with the real solutions and the discussions of mental health and the discussions of, the guardians. Those are we need to we can no longer just be laying on the floor of Publix. Now's the time, if you want to be engaged in this process and in this discussion, then come up with some ideas of help fixing the problem.
It is difficult. It frustrates me when you talk about, I know our group here, we're engaged, but trying to get your neighbors and your churches and stuff engaged in the process. I'll do it. This one pastor said, I'll do it if the other pastors do it, like holding a voter registration drive, and it's like, hello. And then preach, get out in the community.
Telling you need to be our Martin Luther King.
We've
That's
changed
your
some of the laws
comeback.
back for those who have wanted to, and
Yeah.
and the president has changed some of the laws back
Yeah.
as well, so that you can have some of those conversations. But back to your point on the ACLU and those guys and their ability to really squash a lot of the conversations, they did. To the point that people who are not engaged enough now don't even know where their rights are. And it's same with educators and teachers. And they have a lot of rights of things they can do in their classroom. There was a charter school that I was invited to that was, there was a lot of Muslim teachers who were the teachers at the private school. They weren't proselytizing in the school at all, because they're not allowed. It was a regular, traditional charter school. But what they did is they went home and they required their teachers to have home visits with all the families, and they would just say, what they did is they just established a relationship with this family. That's all they did. They didn't do anything illegal. They're not doing anything illegal. They're just establishing a relationship. We have a lot of conservative teachers, Christian teachers in our public schools who are allowed to establish relationships. One of my former aides' mother, who was our youth pastor's wife, was teaching aged out 6th grader course. So these are, 16 and 17-year-old 6th graders. Said, I want to go visit them at home, see what I can do to help. And the principal said, oh, no, you can't. She's like, well, I can't. She's like, you can't go visit them at home. And she's like, well, why not? And she said, because but that's not in our policy. So then she called her daughter, who was my aide, and I said, no, you absolutely can. And then as we traced it down, she realized that yes, she could. So then she went to their homes before school and said, what do you need, how can I help? And she was teacher of the year, and she was a teacher who had not even been a teacher. She was a marketing director who went in to teach and did the intent to earn and become a teacher that way, and did a phenomenal job, was teachers of the year. Now she's not in the classroom, now they've moved her to the district office, but to the good, so that she can start mentoring other teachers of how you can get engaged with these kids. So a lot of it is just not knowing what you can and can't do. For our pastors, they're scared. They don't want to shoot down they don't want to close a whole congregation because they got erroneous information of what they could and couldn't do. So it's a challenge, absolutely. That dog is just loving his life.
Oh, yes.
He needs a sleep number bed because he's snoring very loud.
Anyhow.
Can you talk about public lands and your thoughts about them and the struggles to shift
we
money
can-
from Amendment 1 to
If we
More
can
mine.
maintain all the lands we have, then I would say, you know, if there's land that's out there, but I believe in the public-private partnerships, and I have no problem with utilizing those lands and using them for agriculture, using them for other areas of profitability, not just buying them to be preserved for that purpose. I don't think that's the best use of our funds. I'm a sixth-generation Floridian. I love the culture of Florida. I don't want willy-nilly subdivisions all over everywhere. I don't want to see all of our orange trees gone to subdivisions. That's why I do so many bills to encourage agriculture, because I think it's very important that we keep agriculture. I don't want to have foreign food. I want to have homegrown food. But I also don't believe that we need to take all of our amendment dollars just to buy land. I don't think that we can't adequately maintain the lands we have. So we need, and what we did with Amendment $1 was we beefed up our springs and did some cleanup there. We did a lot with the Everglades and the berms and the things to make sure that we had everything safe there. I mean, so we just weren't spending it on what the environmentalists thought was their best use of the dollars. But I believe that what we did absolutely improved the lands of the state of Florida quite a bit. It wasn't used to, you know, subsidize Amazon distribution center or something. It was meant to it was subsidized. If you looked at, if you want to see a great use of a public partner in land conservation, go down and see what Mosaic and those guys have done with the reclaimed phosphate lands that they have put back to pristine environmental lands after they used the phosphate, or what they did at Stream Song. To me, that's totally appropriate, and there might be a lot of environmentalists who would say, oh, well, they're doing these awful things. They're using the land for the way it's intended, and then putting it back better than they found it. I mean, that's kind of what that's what you're expected. But to say you can never use this land for anything, I don't think that's not the best use of government dollars.
Yeah, I watched as they took a lot of the Selwood lands down there. I remember that fight. And I remember a friend of my husband's who owned that, and he ended up dead. Very strange.
Wow.
But anyway, when they shut that down, somebody got some pictures, and there was all you could see it as far as birds dead. They took that land and they just opened it up. They didn't do anything with it and let it sit there. And these birds got in there, and there was about like 20 million birds dead. And that was the ones you could see, you know, the big white herons and egrets and all that kind of stuff. I don't know about the smaller birds, and they just let it. And just, I don't know what they're doing with it now, but
there's management to state-owned lands. There's management required to those. There's prescribed burns that are necessary. There's invasive species management that's required. I mean, you look at the struggle we're having with the Everglades just to get back the land from the pythons that were during Hurricane Andrew.
Some time ago,
Yes.
released them in there.
Well, what the hurricane did when Andrew happened is where a lot of it began. And they're basically taking over the Everglades. So, we need to go in and do as many python. And when you don't have a natural selection of those things the way it's supposed to be, then it's okay to manage them. So when we had the bear hunts, everybody freaked out, but there was a necessary need for some of the bear hunts because they were moving out of their areas and becoming a threat to people, and it's okay if it's managed. That's why the FWC for when I worked, it was Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission. So that's what I still called it. I worked there for a while in wildlife management, but they're very much environmentally, I mean, that's their whole mission, is to preserve and protect and to make sure these lands are managed appropriately.
Yeah, but my daughter had to stand on her car a couple of times because mother bears would come in with
Oh.
their cubs, and she'd just stand on top of her car.
I think I would have gotten in the car.
And she couldn't, well,
I don't know.
and her phone was in the car, so
She had a choice, she couldn't either
we
quick
couldn't
enough.
call
Wow.
anybody and say, please come and
That's
get
gotta
these
be
bears
scary.
so I can live
Yeah.
my life, you know.
Yeah, that's gotta be scary, so anyhow. Well, I appreciate you guys doing these and having an opportunity for us to get up here and to let you know who we are in a more informal kind of a setting so that we can actually have a
Well, we really
conversation.
appreciate you coming, and I'm sorry it's a small crowd, but we all know a lot of people, and we all talk
Oh,
to
they-
people.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
is gonna help your campaign
It's
a
early
lot,
on.
yes.
We do have, I didn't talk much about that, but we do have a real campaign. The Democratic opponent that I have, the district that I am in, people are like, oh, it's a safe Republican district. And it has historically been that way. But if you look at Orlando, when I first was elected into the Senate, I represented Polk, Osceola, and Orange. And on my Orange delegation, there was me, Eric Eisnagel, Andy Gardner. There was several of us. And then now all of those districts are completely blue. Where they're not, when people are moving and retiring, we're not keeping them. Same is happening in Hillsborough County. We're fighting very hard to maintain Dana Young's seat, which is a senator over there. Trump lost that district by, remember the numbers of what he lost it by. He lost it by quite a bit. My district, when we did some generic polling, was a 50-50 toss-up, Republican or Democrat. So this area is obviously the solid conservative area. Claremont is not. That's in my district. Claremont is a very Democratic area. So is Davenport, all the way down to Point Siena. All of that area is part of the Senate district. So
That's
it's
Hollywood.
not.
That's Hollywood East, coming
Yeah.
from Disney and Universal.
It is. It's
I
that.
watched that happen
And
too.
it's also a lot of the people who are moving up from Puerto Rico, and a lot.
Yeah.
Now I am reaching out to all of them because many of the people that I have met from Puerto Rico are hardworking individuals. They love their families. They typically are pro-family. They're pro-life. I think they become Democratic because the Democrats reach out first, and I think we need to reach out to them and say, listen, we're the ones that are going to help you rebuild Puerto Rico. Many of the people that are coming up don't want to be they could have been in America at any given time. I mean, they just moved here. They didn't choose to live here. They lived in Puerto Rico because that was home. So our goal is to help get Puerto Rico so they can go back home if they want to. So not that like send them back, not that mentality, but they want to move back to where they're from. They
Some
should
of
have
them
the
told me
opportunity.
they want to go back.
Yeah, so we need to help them get their home rebuilt, and just like we worked in anybody,
Exactly.
like we worked in the Key West home, so those people could go home.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that's the goal. But I think that if they're here, there's an opportunity for us to reach out to them on the Republican side and let them know we're helping. And I have no problem with them being here. They were fleeing a very bad situation. I probably would have done the same thing if everything was destroyed and I could move to Georgia. I might have, so there's nothing wrong with that. But we need to help them be able to rebuild Puerto Rico so they can get back home. Everybody needs to help, not just Florida. The nation needs to help.
Yeah,
get
for sure.
Same way we helped Houston, the same way we helped Louisiana.
Well,
So-
and they need to turn Puerto Rico into a self-sustaining instead of us having to always bailing them out, where I believe it said a third of the people in Puerto Rico work for the government.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is
It's like that
way-
fly in California.
Yeah.
They're not self-sustaining.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Help them
So
become
they need to
self-sustaining.
understand, we need to talk to them and get them into constitutional republic,
And this is the time.
ideas, so they will become
This is the time, and Rick
Why
Scott's
don't
been
they
down
want-
there a lot helping, so hopefully we can get
Why
there.
don't they want to become a state?
So I think because they feel like they're Puerto Rico and they're special. They don't think they want to become a state.
The
And
Democrats want them for votes, but.
Yeah, the Democrats want them to become a state, so we can then go more
I don't
into.
think we want them, they don't pay taxes, do they?
I don't think so.
I don't know how their tax structure works.
I don't
Actually,
think
I
so,
don't know.
so,
One of my
I think
But they have their hand out to us.
yeah.
One of
We
my
have
neighbors.
them, like I said, no different than California.
Well, they sound like they want to be three separate states.
Says
Well, yeah, I know, we're not
California
gonna
pays
they can do that, but they only get 2 senators.
I
I do
know
that.
they-
Actually, I think we should just cut California off and blow them away.
But she said, yes, they do, their tax structure is different, but they do pay taxes.
Yeah, because I know they pay some federal, but I don't know.
Go down
They
there.
do, but I don't know how exactly it works either.
I mean, she's been living in Florida for the last 20 years, but She said that, yes, they vote,
Okay.
and they pay taxes,
I do know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your district now?
It's North Polk and South Lake.
Okay.
So it's Claremont, Groveland, every place kind of just south of Leesburg. I'm not, Tavares is not actually in.
No, it's not. We have
Just
a
out.
little bit of mini all of the way. Our
Yeah.
line kind of dips around the Four Corners area.
Okay.
I'm in Jennifer Sullivan's district.
So you're not going to be in my Senate district. Most of the people in Larry Metz's House district would be in my Senate district. So we overlapped a lot. And Dennis Ross's congressional district was pretty much the same as his Senate district. It kind of goes in and has like a top hat that goes into the middle of Lake and
I think
back
it's
on the
called
edges. So.
constructive restructuring.
Oh, it absolutely was that. No,
Oh, yeah,
The
for
League of
sure.
Women Voters in their wisdom absolutely knew what they were doing. I say wisdom lightly, but they, they said, oh no, we're going to have lines that are consistent and congruent.
Yeah.
They followed.
Right.
They loosely followed a power line, I think, through
Yeah.
North Pole.
Right.
Followed the polling booth.
Yeah.
And the district that I had represented in the House and that my husband had represented in the House, the main chunk of it miraculously became this one little piece in Polk County is now part of Senator Lee in Hillsborough. So that was where those were the people.
Did they redivide it like that, like?
We're doing that 4 years.
According to the population or how it shifts and stuff?
Census, if I get reelected, I will be up there for the redistricting again. And my goal, and I'm not, we were doing legal lines before, but they, said that we were not. So they did their version of what they thought were legal lines.
Coming here from Northwest Florida,
Yeah.
there was not a lot of shifting of lines because there's not a lot of people shifting around.
Oh, no, we've had 15,000 people that have
Yeah.
moved into my Senate district since the last
Finish
district. I mean, since last election, 2 years ago. I don't even know, yes, we have to pull what it was since last redistricting, actually. I thought to pull that.
That'd be interesting.
Aren't they pretty much doing that though throughout Florida? I mean,
All
a lot
of
of the
them,
people
all
are
of-
fleeing like New York
Oh, absolutely.
and
We're the third, we
California.
are solidly the third largest state now.
Yeah, right.
For a while there, we were neck and neck with New York.
New
Now we're
York.
solidly ahead of New York. So we have a lot of people are moving to Florida. I don't believe that we're overpopulated. There is still plenty of places for them to live, plenty of subdivisions.
The Okefenokee
areas,
Swamp.
so.
Democrats, just sign up, Democrats relocate here.
Allocated bait.
They can take
That's a
care
good
of
one,
the
Dan.
python.
That's good.
Then they
Yeah.
take care, the Democrats can take
Yeah,
care of
Democrat,
five.
there you go.
Can I ask about water
Yeah.
issues?
Sure.
Bill Nelson probably would.
Just talk about the water issues here, and like we've got like 5 water groups up here. We got the Lake County Water Authority, and as a matter of fact, I just filed for that for one of the positions there because there were too many Democrats that were filing. By the way, there's several people that filed just today.
Wow.
Okay. Then there's
St. John's
you've got
Southwest,
the
Woodland.
Sean Parks created his own little water group down there in South County. And then you've got the St. John's River Water Management District, who coincidentally refuses to ever appoint, and the governor is the one that appoints the members of the committee. They never have appointed anybody from this county. Not ever been able to get
Some
them
of them are
to.
on
And so we don't
Southwest, though. You've
even.
also got Southwest Water Management District too, I believe, or you all St. John's, I think.
We're St. John's, as far as I
Lake County's
know.
all St. John's?
And they just have never appointed one, even though we're Lake County, we got all these lakes, and they set rules on us on a number of areas. So anyway, maybe you can just talk about your thoughts about where the water issues are going, what they are, what you think might be important in the future.
It's a challenge because unfortunately I'm not as familiar with the demographics of Lake with regards to water, but I've done a lot of information on Polk, and I'm assuming Lake would be the same just by where they are, but we're on the ridge, that's why we have so many lakes, which means that we don't have the aquifer quite in the same way. Our water's up on the ridge and then it runs off. So water issues are always going to be important to us because water's up on the ridge is not always the best potable water. So, and it also, we're the headwaters that feed everybody else to some degree. So it's always going to be a challenge for these areas. And then you've also got the other flip sides of water issues where when you are, with the lakes that we have, all those things, it's a very volatile back and forth from land, not drinking portion of it, but just having water sitting and standing and rising and all that kind of stuff. So It's not my area of expertise. I've not worked a lot in the areas of water, but I have been supportive of some of the different water groups that we have put together to let those who, the commission like you're applying for, the people who do want to dive in and learn and study that area, to be the ones to tell those of us at the state level what they think are best water coalitions for their areas. So I have supported that kind of a structure when it comes to water. But it's not an area that I have a lot of expertise. I know the other struggle we have with water is on the side of infrastructure. We have a lot of failing water systems now because they were put in years and years ago. That's always going to be expensive and somewhat unsustainable for some smaller cities and counties to deal with, or smaller HOAs. They go defunct, they turn them over, and someone's going to have to provide that water. So it is a challenge, not my area of expertise.
There's a lot of conflict between those that have septic tanks, and a lot of them up here I have. And then you got the city planners that hate septic tanks, want to convert everybody over to being on city water. But yet then when we had, like Irma came through here, there are places where the city water lines, they didn't have the power. And so then the pump stations that they have failed, and there are houses around here that flooded with sewage. It backed up into their homes because and then their pipe systems are leaking into the aquifer also, and they won't. And so there's a lot of fight about who's better.
Original discussion way back when on personal responsibility. If you have a septic tank, make sure it's maintained, not leaking everywhere. You know, you've got the proper drain fields, they're being maintained. If everybody just did that, septic tanks would be completely fine.
Yeah.
But they don't. So it's got its level of problems with personal responsibility. But I have no problems with septic tanks. But that's the challenge, is keeping them maintained and done and everything else, and making sure that happens. Because you don't want the wrong things going into our drinking water system, and you want to make sure. On the flip side, the government systems also have their failure points as well, because they have issues too. So, but when we did the septic tank bill when I was first elected, and they tried to make all of them be inspected by septic tank inspectors, I'm like, really? No. I mean, that's like saying, okay, we're going to have all the hen houses guarded by the fox, so let us know that, it was like, so I'm like, no, we're not going to, I did not support that bill. It passed anyway, because I'm not sure why, and then it was immediately repealed a couple of years later. Not that I'm walking around telling everybody I was right, it was like, miraculously, all of them were needing to be replaced, and all of them had this problem, again, common sense. But you can't legislate that, and you can't make sure people are doing it. But if you get on the board, and you have suggestions, and you as a board have suggestions, I look to those things, because you're going to research what you need for that board more than I'll have the time to do.
Okay.
Education.
No.
How about transportation? Any thoughts?
Are you running for that one too?
No.
No,
No, it's just it's part of the Senate.
It's,
I mean, they
it's-
get
no,
involved in
we-
these things,
yeah.
and there are
It's
issues.
funding.
I would like to
Absolutely.
know thoughts
We're
about
working on
what
the
you've seen.
different, road. Every year we have some projects to try and improve the transportation and the infrastructure. Again, we're at a crossroads of time right now, because as we're looking forward on our 5, 10, 15, 20-year plans of what we want to do, like with I-4 and some of these roads. At the same time, we have this merging of technology, driverless cars, and all of that's coming at the same time. And people who work in that world are telling us that within 10 years we'll probably have, my grandchild will probably never have to drive a car, which is shocking to me. I don't know that we're going to get there, but then again, if you'd asked me if we'd be where we are with cell phones 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I would have told you never on that too. So I know that, like Disney's moving to the automated buses, and so as that world starts emerging, people are going to be, how it will work, or what people are saying will work in the future. Like, again, I'm feeling really old now when I start talking on these things. But I see it in my children. Have people who will together buy a car, and that one car will take you to work, and you to work, and you to work, and then pick up your kid. And that all sounds foreign to me, but I could see it emerging. And so we're trying to plan, how do you plan out 20 years when you've got an emerging technology that's going to completely disrupt all of that? And I look at that even like with courthouses. When we built the new district courts of appeals and the new buildings, the Taj Mahal you heard about in Tallahassee and some of these other ones, we built them with these incredible libraries and file rooms that they go useless now. They don't need them. We don't, everything's electronic files and everything's on the libraries. We don't need the libraries. Our newest university, Polytech, everyone was freaked out because they didn't have enough volumes in the books. And so they were potentially not going to get some of the accreditations because part of the accreditation was that you had to have so many volumes. And they didn't have any volumes. Everything was online because it was a new type of, we got past that because everyone realized that you don't have, and I still like having libraries. I think you need a little bit of both, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a requirement depending on what the model is that you're using. So transportation, that's going to be a challenge. FDOT is aware of some of those. We've got the test track right there in Polk County that's going to be doing a lot of the emerging technology. So I would venture to say that a lot of this technology as it emerges will probably be utilized probably in Florida before some of the other places, just because of we have a lot of senior population who don't want to lose their autonomy, but maybe wouldn't be able to still drive. When you start into this world, you think about that from a senior community, being able to pick people up, take them to doctor's appointments, things like that. And then we're in the I-4 corridor, we're compact enough, and then what Disney's doing at Epcot, and the foreign visitors that we have here a lot, I can really see some of these things taking off in our area, which is a challenge when you start forecasting 5, 10, 15-year road plan projects. That's what it takes to plan
A
those
few
because they're
years
so
ago,
expensive.
when I was reading and learning about the driverless cars, when they were talking about it, but the possibility of, because they're all run by the computerized, that they
Things
can
can
be
go wrong.
hacked.
Oh yeah, no.
And
I'm not
the
gonna not sit behind that wheel.
There was already a pedestrian killed
Yeah.
because it malfunctioned, by a driverless car. And aren't people still going to have to be responsible?
It depends on how the technology goes. I mean, obviously there's going to be problems in the get-go, but there's also people killed by malfunctions in our current drive cars.
Yeah.
When the airbag randomly deploys, which was happening, and they had all those airbag recalls. So
I've been severely
things-
injured by an airbag.
So see, I mean, so that was so there's going to be issues and technology problems that are going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road going, but I think at the end of the day, that's where technology is moving. And I know my children, my youngest, who's 21, she doesn't want a car. We bought her a car like we bought all the other kids a car, and it sits in the driveway. She would prefer to use public transportation, Uber, not have to worry about parking, not have to have insurance. And I'm like, wow. Who would have thought that she's a lot of her friends. She went to FSU. Yeah, and so she's walking in 900 degrees from work in the rain. Then she's not thinking she was quite so smart.
That's right.
So it kind of goes both ways. So
Well,
anyway,
I remember, and I've seen the video, well, it was a reenactment, in 1901 or something or another, in the state of Illinois, there were 2 cars. Only 2 cars. Guess what? They ran into each other.
That's right, the first 2 cars ever
First
ran
2
into
cars
each
in
other.
here
and
ran
probably if
that
you go
is
back,
true.
they would have said, "Don't ever do a
That's
car."
right.
The Wright brothers, how many issues did they have on the plane?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always going to be bumps in the road when you're trying to get to some of this technology, and it's a really interesting time as we're policymakers. Drones, what do we do with drones? You talk about future legislation. Where does my property line end and the drone's property line begin? It's kind of the same issue that we have, with going forward in the highways and the beaches. That's the problem. We had that discussion where people weren't doing beach nourishment, so you had a property line that extended to here, but then they didn't re-nourish the beach, and your property line kept going here, and now people are walking in your backyard. Who has the right? The person who bought the land with the property right, or the person who has the right to walk on the beach? There's not easy answers to these questions, and we solve them as best we can, and half the time we get it right, half the time we get it wrong. So, anyway, I appreciate you guys having me up here, and
Well, we
I'll come
thank you
back
for
again.
coming. I know it was a hike, but
That's
this
part
was
of this
great.
part of this district. It's just this big green swamp in the middle, which makes it feel like you're going forever. I go to Orlando and Tampa all the time, which is the same drive, but it doesn't seem like it because you're whatever reason you're passing, Chick-fil-A on the way or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway,
For sure.
It's
Thank
great
you
to
very
come up
much.
here. So
Thank you.
Be nice for doing this video.